there's a specific type of woman psychology doesn't have a clean label for. She's not a control freak. She's not just strong and independent, even though people say that about her constantly. She's something more specific than either of those things. Think of a pillar. It holds everything up. It never asked for the job, and nobody checks on it. That's her. The person everyone leans on, the one who holds the structure together, the one who somehow always manages, and the one nobody thinks to ask about. She got this way for a reason. A very specific kind of upbringing wrote rules into her nervous system, and those rules are still running today whether the situation calls for them or not. One of the 7 signs I'm going to walk through looks so much like a strength that most people never recognize it as a problem, including her. So let's get into it. Sign 1 is about where this started. She grew up in an environment where no adult was hovering, which meant she learned to solve problems before anyone noticed there was one. Maybe that was a chaotic household. Maybe it was emotional absence parents who were physically there but checked out. Maybe it was just a time and place where kids were left to figure things out on their own, and that was considered normal. Whatever the specific shape of it, the result was the same. Her brain ran the numbers and reached a conclusion. Waiting for help was less reliable than handling it herself. Patience and self-reliance weren't values she sat down and chose. They were tools she built because the environment required them. Boredom, uncertainty, the absence of someone stepping in her nervous system learned to fill that gap. And during those years, the brain is still writing its core operating rules. The prefrontal cortex is still developing, still deciding what kind of world this is and how to move through it. The rule hers wrote was, I am the most reliable person in this situation. That rule worked. That's the thing. It genuinely worked, and that matters for what comes next. Sign 2 is the moment the pattern locked in. She leaves that environment and enters the real world, and she discovers something that confirms everything her childhood already told her competence gets rewarded. She handles things and people notice. She doesn't fall apart, and that becomes her reputation. Every time she manages something alone and it works out, the original rule gets reinforced. I can do this is a good thing to believe, but somewhere in the repetition, it quietly becomes, I must do this alone. Not a decision she made out loud, just a reflex that hardened over time, one successful solo performance after another. That childhood wiring doesn't only change what she does, it shapes what she can and can't feel. Sign 3 is one of the most disorienting things about her, and it's also the sign that gets mistaken for a superpower most often. She can read a room in seconds. She tracks tension before anyone names it. She senses what's off, anticipates what someone needs, notices the shift in someone's tone before they finish the sentence. Emotionally, she's fluent. She spent years paying close attention to other people's signals, because in her early environment, that awareness was useful. Sometimes it was necessary. But ask her what she needs, and she'll pause longer than you'd expect, not because she's hiding something, because she genuinely has to work to locate it. The attention that went outward for so long left her own interior quieter. Nobody was tracking her signals, so those signals got turned down low. She became fluent in other people's emotional language, and somewhere along the way went near illiterate in her own. Sign 4 is what the outside world sees, which is almost the opposite of that interior experience. Her life looks fine, often more than fine. The career is together, the home is organized, the friendships are maintained, the plans get made and followed through on. From every external angle, she has it handled. The better she gets at holding everything together, the more invisible her actual experience becomes even to herself. The pillar doesn't crack visibly, it just carries more weight in silence, and that silence has a specific origin we need to talk about. Sign 5 is where the control reflex gets its roots. At some point early on, she let go of something. Maybe she asked for help and it didn't come. Maybe she trusted someone to handle something and watched it fall apart. It might have been one specific moment she still remembers clearly, or it might have been a slow accumulation of small disappointments that added up to the same conclusion. However it happened, her nervous system registered it and wrote a rule: when I'm not managing this, things deteriorate. There's research on what happens when people go through financial crisis during their early adult years, the years when they're first building their sense of what the world is and how stable it is. Even after their situation improves, the underlying anxiety doesn't just disappear. The what if it all falls apart current keeps running underneath everything, shaping how they think about risk and security long after the original threat is gone. The emotional version of that is exactly what happens here. The wound formed during a window when her nervous system was still deciding what trust meant, and that decision calcified. The coping skill that kept her functioning in a difficult situation is the same behavior that keeps her isolated in a stable one. That's the shadow side of stress inoculation. The armor that protected her then is the thing that limits her now. She learned to anticipate collapse so well that she can no longer fully believe it won't happen if she steps back. Sign 6 is where that plays out in her relationships, and it's the part that tends to hit hardest. She's the one people call, not because she advertises herself that way, but because she's proven she doesn't panic. She gives real advice. She shows up when it matters. She holds the thing together. Her phone rings when someone's marriage is falling apart, when the plan collapses at the last minute, when someone needs to hear a clear voice in the middle of their chaos. And she answers, every time. But she has no one. She fully leans on herself, not because the people around her don't care. It's that she built the dynamic this way, quietly, over a long time. Her locus of evaluation sits entirely inside herself. She doesn't look outward to check whether she's okay. She looks inward and decides. So the people in her life never got a signal that she needed the dynamic to reverse. They learned their role by watching her play hers. Everyone leans on her. She leans on no one, surrounded by people who need her, and slowly the realization settles in that it never goes the other way. That pattern isn't a character flaw. It's what a logical mind does when the environment trained it to. Sign 7 is the open loop from the beginning, and it's the one that gets called a personality trait when it's actually a symptom. She stopped being spontaneous. Not because joy went somewhere, not because she's rigid or boring or closed off, but because releasing control started to feel like exposure. Spontaneity requires not knowing what happens next and being okay with that. And for someone whose entire internal architecture was built around anticipating and preventing things from going wrong, that's not freedom. It registers as danger. What gets quietly traded away is the ability to lie down without a mental to-do list running in the background, the ability to say yes to something unplanned without immediately calculating what it costs, the ability to need something and just need it, without the next thought being how to solve it herself before anyone notices. She didn't become this way because she was inherently strong. She became strong because she didn't have another option. That distinction matters more than it sounds. Strength that comes from necessity and strength that comes from choice look identical from the outside, but they feel completely different from the inside. One is a gift. The other is a response that never got the message the situation changed. The environment that required this no longer exists, but the rule it wrote is still running. The capability is real. The resilience is real. What needs updating is the default setting, not the person. So here's something concrete. Find one thing you've been carrying alone this week and hand it to someone else. Not because it's a crisis, not because you can't manage it. Just to practice letting someone else hold something and watching nothing fall apart. That's the whole exercise. If this kind of psychology interests you, the next video goes deeper into how the mind actually works the patterns underneath the patterns. If you want to understand people on a completely different level, that one's worth watching next.